be sinful, be full of lust, be full of rage, be full of sloth, be full of envy. Tell yourself that you're doing it in the name of charity, virtuosity, and what's good for the greater good. There's a very positive correlation between heavy-handed virtue signaling, exhibitionistic displays of altruism, and the dark triad traits. When I turn on the TV or I look in the music industry, you'll see a lot of covert narcissism. It's not so easy to detect.
She's like alpha narcissist to me.
You idiots keep worshipping them. Stop platforming people who are evil. The road we're on now is not a good one. I sense bloodshed.
Richard Grannon, what's the smiling no test?
It's where you casually tell somebody that you suspect has narcissistic personality disorder, and gently and politely, no. And you smile as you do it. And that's the smiling no test. If they then have a temper tantrum because you smilingly said no, then that's an indication that they're probably having some issues relating to reality in, let's say, an adult way.
And does that tell us they are narcissists? Because are there non-narcissists who also have a difficulty with no?
It would be an indication of a highly narcissistic style. It wouldn't, I mean, it's not the final test for narcissistic personality disorder by any means. To really know, we'd have to take them to a psychiatrist, and they would need to run a series of tests under clinical conditions to get a definite affirmative yes that they have MPD. But it's an indicator that you're dealing with somebody with a highly narcissistic style for sure.
I want to talk to you today about narcissists, or people who are nice, who act nice, who are actually narcissists, I suppose both on an individual level, but also on a political, larger level. I saw recently that people who engage in virtue signaling and victim signaling, where they keep considering themselves to be victims, are very likely to score highly on one of the dark triad traits. Triad traits. What are those traits, and does that surprise you at all?
It doesn't surprise me. But when you asked me to interview, I went and reviewed the research to make sure I was up to date. And there's actually a lot that's been done in the last 5 years on this area. And there's a lot of published peer-reviewed research that indicates there's a very positive correlation between heavy-handed virtue signaling, exhibitionistic displays of altruism, and, as you just rightly said, the dark triad traits. The dark triad would be narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism.
What does Machiavellianism mean?
It's from Machiavelli, who famously said, the end justifies the means. These are people who are very, very goal-orientated, highly manipulative, and very low in compassion.
That sounds like a few people I can think of. But so, and what? Okay, we should also go with what is narcissism.
Narcissism is a trait that all human beings have. We all have latent narcissism, so we're all somewhere on a sliding scale of trait narcissism. And as it gets stronger and stronger, as you slide up the scale, it becomes more and more maladaptive, meaning it does more and more damage to the person who has the trait, and more damage to the people around them, until eventually you're looking at a situation, say you're low in narcissism, you can cooperate, you can deal with people, but you can be self-interested. That is good, that is healthy. All human beings pass through a phase. Narcissism was largely defined by Freud, not originally by Freud, but he did the most development of it. And he said there's a phase that all infants go through. When you're a toddler, you should develop a healthy narcissistic phase, and then you should mature beyond that phase. Right. And some people never do. And so they're stuck in this child phase, but a very early stage of development. They're stuck at like age 3, age 4. You see little kids age 3, age 4, they start saying no to mummy and daddy, or they grab something and go, it's mine. This is good. This is healthy. They should pass through that. They should then learn to share. They should learn to cooperate, and they should realize when their little friend or their little sister is crying, they're crying the same way that they cry when they're in pain. And that's how you develop, as a human being, empathy and compassion. For some of these people, for some of these children, when they're growing up, because of there's epigenetic factors, for sure, there's a genetic component to this, we know that, but it's largely environmental. Their response to the stress of the environment can be to develop a full-scale psychotic break with reality, where they unconsciously choose to live inside of a fantasy version of reality, where they are the center of the universe. That's narcissistic personality disorder. When I was describing the sliding scale of traits, that isn't. So you can have somebody who's highly narcissistic. They can go to talk therapy once a week for 6 months and come back with better communication skills and a better sense of empathy. I would claim that with narcissistic personality disorder, the full break from reality, therapy won't work. Therapy will only be an environment where they can practice their narcissism, and it can actually make them worse. That's not just my opinion. There's published literature that says that as well. Some types of psychopaths and narcissistic personality disorder, normal, naive, well-intentioned talk therapy will make them worse.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I went to therapy for a while, and it actually did help me become, I don't know if maybe narcissistic's not the right word, but less self-centered in some respects. So maybe I don't have the disorder as such, but I definitely went in, and the therapist told me this as well, that a lot of people go in to talk to him and they start by saying, oh, this person did this, my parents did that, everyone's doing that. And if it's working after 6 to 12 months, often they'll start to say, well, okay, I can't control those things. It's not necessarily their fault, but they can help it. And I can choose how to act about things and take control of things.
Yes.
Would you sort of offer that advice as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and to be compassionate and forgiving. We're all human beings. We all have blind spots. We all have a shadow that needs integrating. These are classic Freudian defense mechanisms. It's not all about early childhood. Some of these develop in adolescence, and then in school, at university, in your first jobs, where you learn to offset the responsibility of things that perhaps are yours to hold by projecting them onto other people. There's a lot of defense mechanisms that we all use regularly. A good therapist will teach you that there's a better way of interacting with reality and other human beings than through defense mechanisms, which are fundamentally ego-based, which means they are narcissistic defenses.
It feels sometimes like control as well. Is control involved? I guess I had to feel like, oh, this person isn't behaving the way I wanted them to, so I better advise them how better to act. And if you start doing that to everyone around you, you're trying to control your environment.
It's very much a disease, a mental health issue of control. And in fact, sometimes for certain types of narcissism, it's frequently comorbid with something called obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which is all about perfectionism and control and trying to make external reality fit your ideal of what it should be inside of your head, which if you think about it, that's quite childlike. You're like, no, I want it to be like this, but it isn't. But I want it to be, but it ain't. So the ability to accept that people aren't what we want them to be, the world isn't what we want it to be, that's a sign of maturation, what Jung would have called individuation.
Interesting. So I had OCD as a teenager. It's not bad now. And I think part of that, I don't know, because often we sort of put people in boxes. This person has that, this person. And I think part of developing away from the OCD was the same as what I was saying with the therapist. I started to understand and to actually embrace not being able to control. That was the way to do it. It was like, I'm almost controlling my way of not controlling and just letting be. And that was so nice. And then the OCD sort of fizzled out a little bit. Yes,
it will do. I mean, I want to make clear that there isn't a correlation between OCD and narcissism. OCPD is quite different, but it's rooted in similar defense mechanisms. I just don't want them to. I just don't want to destroy your confidence.
What was the P? The OCP?
The OCPD is personality disorder. So obsessive compulsive personality disorder is different to obsessive compulsive disorder.
Interesting.
So OCPD is an obsession with perfectionism and making the world the way you want it to be, but it isn't unrelated to OCD, obviously, because in OCD, you're engaging in sort of ritualistic, repetitive activities that are external to try and moderate your internal feelings. It's almost a way of dealing with anxiety, depression, emotional dysregulation through an external source. You're like, oh, if I just do this and this and this, everything will be okay. Yeah. And actually, probably the healthier and more adult way to deal with things is to say it's as good as it gets right now. Just let it be, and whatever happens, you'll cope with it.
Just take a breath.
Yeah, take a breath. Take a breath.
Yeah. It's nice.
Yeah.
That feels nice. I try to do that more. Take a breath and just enjoy breathing.
There's a lovely technique I got from Andrew Huberman. He didn't develop it, but he's espousing it. It's called the physiological breath. So you know when little kids cry, and then when they finish their crying or their tantrum, they go,
yeah.
That's called a physiologic breath. So if you do like 5 repetitions of 2 sharp intakes, 1 long exhale, it actually
does feel good.
Yeah, just 5 repetitions.
I'm concerned about podcast listeners with the sniffing and breathing, but I did listen to a Joe Rogan episode recently with Elon Musk where they ate pizza for about 45 minutes.
Oh God!
Just chewing. Just that for 45 minutes while talking with their mouths full.
Yeah.
And it was only after about 40 minutes that Joe Rogan, the world's most famous podcaster, so he should know a bit about audio and things like that, said, you know what, maybe this isn't nice for our listeners.
There's a specific psychological condition I can't remember right now where it really drives people crazy if they can hear you chewing.
I might have that. I'm sitting there, I'm like on a run as if I was running. I was walking somewhere, listening to that. I'm like, can they please stop eating the pizza? I want to hear what they say, but I'm not interested in the pizza. So yeah, a couple of sniffs and a breathe out, I think is actually all right.
Yes.
I would encourage any listeners to do that now.
Yeah.
Do you in your life, do you think of either famous people or just in your life, are there many in your mind right now who are narcissists who are hiding it from you?
I mean, certainly when I turn on the TV, or I look in the music industry, or I look at like social media influencers, you'll see a lot of what sometimes refers to as covert narcissism. It's not so easy to detect. It's also sometimes described, or a variation can be pro-social narcissism, where people gather their narcissistic supply by genuinely doing charitable things and actually having benefit in the world, but they're doing it for narcissistic supply. So I didn't say before, and I should have done, when we're talking narcissistic personality disorder, if anybody wants to understand the behavior of a narcissist, they should think of them as a junkie, an addict who needs supply. Narcissistic supply is not just being seen or being heard. It has to come as a form of adulation and congratulations, preferably from an audience, preferably from multiple people. That's pro-social. Communal narcissism is where you're drawing your narcissistic supply by contributing to a community and being a member of a community and saying, hey, I represent the group and this is what I'm doing. I see you nodding your head because I'm sure you can think of a few people.
I'm thinking, well, you and I have spoken, and I don't want to labour it because that was my old channel and this is for the new channel. Yeah. Meghan Markle is a prime example. And
yes.
I think we can talk about that a little bit without being overly sensationalist. I mean, it's just a fact that she appears to be somebody like many celebrities who uses like, I'm a feminist, I'm doing this nice stuff, but actually you just married a prince.
Yes. I think it's a funny thing. It's one of the few things. There's not. It's a sign of age and a sign of going to therapy as well. I think like there's not much that winds me up, but one of the things I do occasionally get wound up by is I can see these people very, very clearly, and a lot of people can't. And I start to stutter. I'm exasperated. I'm like, how could you possibly not see? I'm indignant with rage. How could you not see? Open your bloody eyes. I sound like my grandfather.
No, but I relate to that. And I'm sure most people listening do as well.
Yeah.
There's nothing more frustrating than when you're like that. It goes back to school. Say you're 14 years old and like one of the kids in class is being a suck up to the teacher.
Yes.
And it's like, you want to say like, don't you see through that? They will get a good score. Why is no one else seeing what I'm seeing? And I think most people are. Yeah. We're not saying anything and then they're getting away with it.
Yes, and people really are, sorry to say, they're getting away with murder these days, and it's so frequently in my field when the online space of narcissism is just booming. It's exploded since I've been involved since 2011. It's exploded in the last 12, 13 years. And I spoke to a group of therapists this Sunday just gone, and I was like, most of your clients are getting their information about narcissism from people on YouTube like me. They're not getting it from the published research. They're not getting it from they're not getting it from the books. They're getting it from YouTube. And one of the things that I want to shout from the rooftops, because everybody's saying we're in a pandemic of narcissism, we're actually in a pandemic of codependency. Narcissists are very few and far between, but people are like, it seems to be everywhere. I'm like, it really isn't. It's just you idiots keep worshipping them. Stop platforming people who are evil. Stop worshipping people who are clearly have no interest in you. They don't care about you. They're addicted to themselves. They're addicted to their own image, and they're seeking to exploit you, and they feel entitled to do that. But we don't. We're codependent. We're passive, and we let this take place. It's for me, it's one of the few things that still can get me wound up.
Yeah, well, I wonder if as well we're dependent on them as well because they're often promoting messages that we might agree with.
Yes.
So I'm thinking of another narcissist. Before I say these things, I'm already imagining the comments being angry at me. But Greta Thunberg for me is like, she's like alpha narcissist to me. She's like the narcissist of all narcissists.
Yeah.
Who's of the nice people narcissist because she's the activist. And I think if you're someone who wants to promote that message, the fact that a 15-year-old at the time she was is saying it in the most simplistic terms. You don't care because you just want to get that message out there.
Yes.
But how could she not have become a narcissist when at 15 years old she was told that she wasn't just smarter, better than everyone, she was more morally virtuous?
Oh, she was a little saint. She was the saint of that particular manifestation of environmentalism, this hardcore extreme form of environmentalism, and she was the saint of it. There is something called context-specific narcissism. I remember years ago people getting very angry with Justin Bieber because he got drunk and was punching paps and peed in a flower pot in a 5-star hotel. And I'm like, can you imagine, any of you, what it would be like to be 17 years old and having that much wealth and fame and opportunity thrown at you, as if we'd all just be sat there going, oh, no more cocaine or fame for me, darling. That's quite, no more money. Thank you. I've had enough. No, you'd be grabbing at it with both hands. And eventually, of course,
as you were before we started.
As I were. Yeah, they just had to wipe me off. There's cocaine everywhere. Eventually, of course, he ends up, as he is now, like he looks to me a pretty broken chap because that fame machine spits people out. There's the double standard as well. So we're incredibly codependent, and then we're massively hypocritical, and we're hiding all of our would be called in Freudian terms, we're disavowing our own dark sides and then projecting it out onto other people. This is not fair. It's not right, and we do it in the name of virtuosity. Who is virtuous? Really, we're humans. We're just out the trees. Yeah. We just climbed out the jungle. Can everybody calm down with this holier than thou? I would never. Yes, you did. We all did. It's okay. I don't think it's healthy to pretend that the things that happened 60, 70 years ago, these mass psychotic movements, whichever side of the political spectrum they're on, that caused the death of millions, for us to be like, oh no, but not us. Yeah. No, we're more evolved. I'm like, evolution doesn't work like that. You can have like massive brain and physiology evolution in 130 years. It doesn't work like that. We need humility. We need to be humble, and we can say, yes, maybe me. In that context, that's why I brought up context-specific narcissism. If I was Greta Thunberg, age 15, shoved onto that platform, saying those words, and all the adults around me, I was in an echo chamber, they were going, oh, so brave, so wise. Maybe I would have also become a bit obnoxious with it. Maybe you would. Maybe any human being would. We've got to be compassion has to flow both ways. Like if I'm being compassionate, has to flow to me, has to flow to other people. And I look and I see and I go, yeah, I can see what you're doing. But if you keep doing this, and I know you see this, the road we're on now is not a good one. This is a dangerous path we've chosen. Yeah.
And as you say, it's happened so many times throughout history where people have started saying, we're nicer than everyone, we're better than everyone, and then bloodshed.
Yeah. How
do they not see that? We're back to that again. I can't keep going back to that. Why doesn't everyone see it? But they don't see it. But Greta, I think that's an absence of parenting. That's bad parenting, isn't it? To tell your 15-year-old kid that they're better than everyone else and they should be meeting Obama and lecturing him.
I can't imagine that it's anything other than highly narcissistic parenting. You know, I mean, I've never met her parents, I've never seen them, but we don't have to complicate everything and draw psychoanalytic theory into everything. Her parents chose to allow that to happen and maybe even trained her for it. I mean, it's possible that she trained herself, that she's some sort of a high IQ, maybe somewhere on the autism spectrum, virtuoso, who just had a message, believed in it, went out there. But it's likely, forgive my cynicism, that her parents had a hand in it, and her family had a hand in it, and the environment and the culture and the country that she comes from also impacted this. The holier than thou virtue signaling is a good thing because we know what is right. How dare you? How dare you? Like, you're a human being. You've got socks on, right?
Are you deliberately parroting what she said?
Yes. How dare you? How dare you steal my dreams?
My childhood.
My childhood.
What a narcissistic thing to say. But she was a kid, so...
Yeah, well, she is a kid. I just think the idea of her or anyone saying, I have the solution and this is how we should live. I'm just like, just chill with that. Yeah. You don't. We really don't. Like, because of the interview, I went and looked at the science as much as I can understand it on climate change. This is not settled science. Why are people acting as though it is?
Like, I wondered, just hearing you say that, what percentage of people listening or viewing suddenly got their back up and they're going, hang on, why am I annoyed? Because I don't know enough about climate change, so I want to listen to what you're going to say now. Mm-hmm. But I'm just thinking, are there some people going, he's going to be a climate change tonight, and they're already ready to pounce?
Yeah. I can't be a climate change denier because, and I'm sorry, but like, if you're on either side of the spectrum on this, you're wrong, because none of it is settled science. It seems to be that if you take the consensus from science, which is usually how science works, you've got to look at the thick end of the wedge and say, well, what are the absolute experts saying? It's not conclusive. It's not that there is no, it's very unlikely that human beings are having zero impact on the climate. That's extremely unlikely. It's also extremely unlikely that imminent doom is around the corner in 30 years' time if we don't reduce car emissions. Neither thing is settled science. I forget climate change for a second because I'm not an expert on that, but we can talk about, and we both can, psychologist, journalist, what's the narrative? And how are we constructing that narrative, and how are we conducting the debate? You as a journalist and me as a psychologist can say, well, we could do it without extremism. We can do it without shouting each other down. We can do this without emotional and psychological violence. Let's go facts first, not feelings first, like adults should. Because if we're not going to do that, I have to assume that what I'm consuming is propaganda and is politically motivated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even if you were to go with the most extreme end, that in 30, 40, 50 years, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. That's very troubling. But it doesn't mean it's easy, because a lot of people live on the poverty line, depend on the current situation, the current fossil fuels and things like that. So, and that's what she doesn't have the solution for. And too many activists come forward and they don't have a solution. They're just angry at what's going on. And it's like, well, I would like car exhausts not to be all horrible and smoky and even, just for that. But if that means that some impoverished communities are going to not have any money and put food on the table, think about these things. But I don't think it goes through a lot of activists' minds.
It doesn't seem to, because that would require nuance. And maybe we could say, if you're an activist on either side, because you've obviously read similar research to me. I got mine from Michael Schellenberger cited it, and it's from a guy called Hannes Sacker from this year, March of this year, published from the University of Leipzig, and he's talking about the correlation between dark triad traits and environmental activism. And I would say, on either side of any activists, like, what is an activist? They're saber rattlers. They're trying to get attention for a cause. They're raising awareness, and they want to, through doing that, affect change in the world. Fine, that's okay. But will it not, by necessity, attract a certain personality type? And do we not need to have some checks and balances and filters for that? Because if you genuinely and sincerely believe in this cause, that cause, but leaving aside environmentalism for a second, that's fine. But are you here because you're angry with your father? Are you here because you're struggling with drug addiction? Are you here because you're diagnosed with psychopathy, borderline personality disorder? Because we know, the psychologists are too polite, they won't say, but they know very well. Jordan Peterson avoided saying it. For the first 5 years he was famous. I had people who are following me who went to see him, ask him about borderline personality disorder and political activism. For the first 5 years, he wouldn't answer the question. Now he does. Because it's known. We know that it's not just borderlines, for the people who then go crazy in the comments. It's not just borderlines who engage in this, but we know there's a correlation between political activism and certain disorders that involve emotional dysregulation, like borderline personality disorder, manic depressives as well. Because they want to be part of a crowd screaming against authority figures, because that's what's already, if they didn't have that, they'd be shouting at the wall at home, because they're unhappy, they're traumatized, they're in pain, they need a release valve. And we know this. You've seen the footage, the memes, the same as I have on Instagram. People shouting slogans and calling people literally Hitler and this and that. And then when they're actually interviewed and they say, why did you just shout that? Do you know what you're saying? No, I don't. I don't know what the words mean, but I feel, okay, you feel wonderful. We are adults. We're not children. If you go feelings first, facts second, that's only acceptable to somebody under the age of 12. Everybody else has to do better.
Peter Boghossian was on this channel recently. Did you see that? The famous video he did in Portland State University when there were people on the roof. Peter Boghossian does this game where he goes and asks a question that's controversial,
Yeah.
and you have to stand either at like, I don't, that's totally disagree, or agree, or in the middle. And he just wants to know, okay, how would you move a bit further this way or that way?
Yeah.
It's really interesting. And he did one that was a bit controversial, I suppose, in front of the social sciences building in Morton State University, which is the place you don't want to do this. And there were only 2 genders.
Oh,
and then you have,
brave man.
yeah, and you have to stand then in the specific place. And there's like someone doing it, oh, I think I actually don't agree. And it's like interesting. You can have the conversation. Oh, I think there are more genders. Okay, that's interesting. Why do you think that? And a bunch of people, students and teachers, I think, from the social, they were on top of the building looking down, swearing at him, screaming at him, shouting horrible things. And eventually they came down, like arms folded, just like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And he's like, do you want to know what the game is? And they didn't want to know. They're just like, well, no, because it's offensive. And all this stuff is like, and they're ganging up, and he was so calm. He's
great. He's really. I follow him on Instagram, and I love watching his videos.
Oh, you got to watch that later then.
Yeah. he's a good example of just the kind of thing that I suppose I'm alluding to, which is we got to bring the Socratic method back to the way we hold dialogue. We have to bring reason back. Socratic method would be, I mean, strictly speaking, for the Socratic method to be the Socratic method, you say there's 2 genders. Let's take that as an example. I say, no, there's as many genders as you want. Before we debate, you have to express my position to me, to my full satisfaction.
Oh, I like that.
And I have to express your full position to you, if it's not to your satisfaction, I have to keep going until I get it right. And then you say, go on then, lads, now argue. Now I fully know what you mean, and you're hearing me, and I'm hearing you. It's simple.
Why don't we all do that?
That's base level philosophy. It's like philosophy 101. And we should absolutely, imagine how many debates would end if we simply were forcing each other. Well, sorry, forcing is a bit. The dictator in me is coming out.
Imagine how many, if we force people with handcuffs.
If we encourage them gently to engage in the Socratic method, we would resolve so many issues so quickly. I mean, again, it's away from narcissism, away from ego. We've got this platform, we've got social media, we want to be seen, and you want your gotcha moment. So like Andrew Gold destroys narcissism expert with 2 million views. Narcissism's not real. And I'm there going, oh, sorry about that. People love it. Okay. So that's the environment. That's the incentives that are created in the environment. It's incentives driven. I got this from Konstantin Kisin, and you'll be speaking to this weekend on trigonometry. People are motivated by incentives. Okay. So what's the incentive here? Well, it's to kind of be a dick. Who's going to get heard? Who's going to get millions of views on YouTube? Who's going to get millions of views? This gentle, reasonable conversation, you'll get views, but you want screaming, you want shouting, you want clothes torn and people banging their heads on the table. It's like 2 chaps just having a polite conversation. I ain't going to do it. Let's go. We're doing it for the views.
Yeah. Well, they literally do start boxing all the time, don't they? The big YouTubers.
Yes.
Did you see Alex O'Connor? Is that his name? Alex J. O'Connor. But I think this is Cosmic Skeptic.
Right.
He had Peter Hitchens on.
Okay.
It's probably the biggest sort of meltdown I've ever seen on TV or YouTube. It's extraordinary. And Peter Hitchens just goes off for no reason. I really think I don't understand what the reason was. It was because Alex kept asking him the same sort of questions, and he gets cranky.
Yeah.
He got cranky.
I like Peter Hitchens, but
so do I. But this time it was like I can't defend this because he goes off the screen and he's just going like he's talking for half an hour off the. You can just sort of hear him. Every now and then he comes back in and he's like, and another thing you did was this, and Alex is just like. Oh, and he's going, what you don't realise is you've had me under false pretenses. And it's great, but it's like the biggest video he's ever done, Alex O'Connor now, because it's just like millions of people, because we all wanted to watch
We love that,
I watched it every day. So
couldn't get out of bed without it. But that's the environment we've created. And so it rewards polarization. It rewards a lack of reason. It rewards emotionality and extremism. Well, I gently put forward the notion, ladies and gentlemen, that that's dangerous. That's not smart. We've got to do better than that because, look, in all due humility, like, whatever the issue is, it's environmentalism, it's the current situation, Israel-Palestine. We are mortal beings. We're not here for long. We can make this a fucking hellscape if we try. Or we can edge towards something that is peaceful and pleasant for us to live in, because life is hard enough. At the moment, we're going the hellscape route because I don't know, ego. It just seems to be something in the human ego, some dark side in human nature that we can't integrate, is taking over, and it seems to take over cyclically. So we've had several decades of unusual peace, and now as a species, where we see, to me, it feels like we're gearing up for the old gulags and genocide and jackboots again, because I don't know, unintegrated shadow, we've disavowed too much of our own animalistic nature. I don't know what it is, but I sense bloodshed. I sense imminent bloodshed and imminent chaos. It's like the peace is too much for us to deal with.
It's like we get bored.
Yeah.
Every 30 years, every 50 years. I was talking to you about this before, of course, the presidents of the top universities of America were sat there under some sort of court process. I don't know what it was exactly, with a woman saying and these were, I think they were all female, the presidents of the universities, just saying, would you consider it to be hate speech or to be against your code of conduct for people to shout for genocide of Jews? And she didn't say Israel, she said of Jews. And every single president, one after the other, would refused to say, that's against our code. They all just said, well, it depends on the context, depends on and the person asking was just incredulous, just going, you won't say that. You won't say that you can't say genocide to Jews. And they were just going, depends. And that's obviously, they're trying to do something clever about virtue signaling and intersectionality and the idea that Jews, I suppose, to them are super white and so privileged, so they don't deserve the same protection as certain other minorities at their universities. But that's the kind of thing that gets it started. I mean, when you say bloodshed, that's when such high up elite people in those circumstances are saying that. It feels like we're ready to go.
So I didn't know about this incident until you described it just before we started filming. But I like philosophy. I'm not educated in philosophy. I just try and read the books. There's a Slovenian philosopher called Slavoj Žižek, and he's made this point numerous times. Like, really awful bloodshed usually starts metaphorically. It starts through poetry, it starts through art, it starts through conversation, and that the worst forms of bloodshed, he goes further, because he talks about the reality of the virtual rather than virtual reality. He says that the virtual space has a reality that's hard for us to comprehend, and it has gravitational force, psychologically speaking. So the sort of the germination of an idea is there. And that really, the story you've told me, that bothers me a lot, because you're saying the presidents of Ivy League universities in America will not roundly denounce the suggestion of genocide of any ethnic group. What's happening? What kind of a time are we living through? That really is... That's very frightening. That's frightening.
They do it from a place of sort of moral defiance almost. They think they're virtuous in doing so.
You can't, I mean, I would just, if I was there, I would have said, well, okay, let's make this really simple. Will you condemn murder or not?
They said, each one of them sort of then stipulated, well, if it actually gets carried out, and then the woman interrupted, if genocide actually happens, then it's bad at your university. Okay, then it's bad. But if people are calling for it, it depends on the context.
So in the university then, if I was at if I was at Harvard and I said, right, what we should do is smash in the head with a hammer of everybody in this school called Kevin, they wouldn't stop me.
Kevin might be fine with Kevin, but some names you wouldn't be fine with.
I suppose so. Yeah, I just think it's so easy to ridicule and so easy to prove false. Like if you say, okay, anybody whose name begins with a K, I am saying that everybody on this campus whose name begins with a K, we should kill with a hammer tomorrow. Of course they would stop me.
It's an ideological thing whereby they want to protect their students who are protesting against Israel and who are calling for jihad and something called global intifada, which implies genocide of Jews. But that's not the question they were asked by this woman at the process. They were asked, is it wrong to call for genocide of Jews? And they were just, depends on the context.
That's disgusting. That's absolutely disgusting. And they're cowards.
It feels like the kind of thing that in 50 years' time, after the next war, the next Holocaust, those videos are shown and people go, how did it get to this?
Yeah.
And they're so sure of their moral certitude.
That's really sick. I don't go online and bang on about woke and leftism anymore, because I came to a conclusion about a year and a half ago that it just wasn't doing any good. In fact, makes things worse. But I did say 2 or 3 years ago in a YouTube video I did, the extremist end of woke radical leftism, and I speak as a former radical leftist, feels today like a death cult. It is fundamentally anti-human. Everything that is human and natural and healthy, they find a way to denounce it as being racist, colonial, patriarchal, or guilty of some other ism. It's like they hate life. It's like they hate human life. It's an anti-life death cult, is how it seems. So in a way, I'm not surprised to hear that this is where it's gone to. I'm disgusted, but I'm not that surprised because, of course, once you've chosen, you can either be a moral absolutist or you can be a moral relativist. And once you've chosen the cowardice of moral relativism, you can be made to do mental acrobatics to justify almost anything. And it sounds like that's the position they've put themselves in. They've made a deal with the devil.
It was a Voltaire quote, wasn't it? Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities.
That's really good. I've never heard that before.
Yeah,
I like that.
That's good. We're talking about these nice acting narcissists. I don't want to make you think of 10 in your head right now, but what are 10? I've got a list of them, so because I've written them down from your video about it, so you can go through them. Yeah. So if you can remember a few of them, and then I can find out which other ones.
Do you mean traits?
Yeah, traits that would help you to notice one, I suppose.
To identify it. I think like one of the big things to look for is ostentatious displays of care for minority groups, even if so say minority groups, people might immediately assume something to do with race or ethnicity. Let's say I ostentatiously, in a very show-off way, suddenly start banging on about the mental health of all divorced fathers. You know, divorced fathers, I guess you could class that as a kind of a subsection of society. It's kind of a minority group, and you're really concerned with their mental health. And I start banging on. There's a lot that virtuous stance becomes a shield to any criticism that's made of me. And I've seen people online do this, and they'll be like, well, why don't you care about divorced mothers? Or why don't you care about this? Why don't you care about that? My shield is, I am saving these men from depression and the possibility of choosing to leave the planet. As I don't want to get your video, what are you called? Throttled by saying that word.
Yes. You are a fellow YouTuber.
You have a fellow YouTuber. Yeah. So these men could choose to leave the planet at any moment. How dare you? How dare you accuse me? So that is a shield then to any sort of criticism, a shield of virtuosity. So look, sometimes people really are doing good things. I said ostentatious. When it feels tinny, plastic, when it feels not quite right, I've seen loads of people do this. I've seen influencers do it. I've seen MMA, I don't want to name them, but MMA fighters do it. All of a sudden, out of the blue, they suddenly really, really care about this or that mental health issue. For somebody who's been at this for now since I was 18, so the best part of 30 years of my life, it's very irritating for me nowadays to see people just pick up mental health issue and then wave it round like it means something. I'm like, what are you talking about? What research have you done? What specifically are you referencing here? So ostentatious and also facile. I think if the cause is very facile, if they're not really doing anything and they're not really provided any insight, they're just like, well, I'm terribly concerned for the mental health of divorced fathers. I mentioned incentives before. In an incentive-driven system, I know perfectly well, you know perfectly well the YouTube algorithm goes. You put a thumbnail of a sad-looking divorced father and put divorced fathers come here and do that for a year, you'll have 1 million subscribers and however hundreds of thousands of views, and you'll be making your money from doing that. It's called niche marketing. So I would even go one step further and say some of the virtue signaling that we see being carried out online is so cynical. They're already thinking about the YouTube views and the Google ad revenue they're going to get as they make these public statements. Be cynical is what I would say to people. Be cynical. Watch out for this stuff because it's too easy to get away with in this environment.
Do you see, there's the victim signaling ones as well. Have you seen there's loads and loads of usually particularly attractive young women who make these videos saying, I have no friends on YouTube.
Right.
They get millions of views.
Yeah.
And it's like, obviously, not only do you have friends, but you bully everyone else and you're horrible. But it's just, I just have like no friends. Oh my God. And it's like, and then everyone's going, oh my God, but you're gorgeous. You're wonderful. How could you post millions of comments? Because people are just like, how can this very attractive young woman not have friends? I can't believe it. And what's sad is that then people who really don't have friends and don't have a life and don't have looks and the things that woman has, they're all jumping to make this person feel better.
Yes, because there's no IQ gate to the internet.
That's unfortunately. That's
you should have to pass an IQ test before you have internet access
to log in. I used to live with a woman who I thought was a narcissist, and she came from a very, very wealthy background. It was no problem with that, but we lived in her house, which was like a mansion, and I rented a room, and she would never do her cleaning duties, and it always felt to me like, because it was her house, it was so out of order really when you're living with a few people like that. And she would sometimes like have friends over and they'd be drinking wine and stuff, and I would be like cleaning around her feet, like her own stuff that she's done, and she would be like, oh, the thing with Andrew is he's good at like household chores and things, but I care about the Bolivians. She had like this thing about the Bolivians. I care about all the South Americans and all that. And I used to sometimes turn around and say, there are poor people in like Tottenham. Like, there's a hungry person right now within a few blocks. You can go and give them some of your leftovers.
Have you noticed they only hate people who are very, very, they only love people who are very, very far away and very different to them.
That's it. It's easy to love. They don't ever have to be proven. Nothing absolutely.
Yes, nothing.
My God. So that's narcissism. Okay, so that's one. Let's go for another one. What else? What should people look out for? They're going, okay, is my friend who seems nice a narcissist?
I think where you see a lot of easy charm and they seem very, very friendly, but then when you actually speak to them and you start talking about yourself, they're clearly losing interest. So they appear to be interested in you, but then when you tell a story about yourself or you're talking about yourself, they either lose track. They have no idea what you're talking about, even though you just told them the names of the people involved 30 seconds ago. They start yawning, their eyes glaze over, or they actively start changing the conversation back to themselves. It's easier to see narcissism when the person is very brash, very aggressive, very arrogant, and very clearly exploitative. It's harder to detect it when it's like this. If the person is fundamentally only psychically energized by the attention being fed back into them, that's an indication, despite the niceness, despite maybe they're very generous in some ways, that you're looking at somebody who is the nice guy narcissist or pro-social narcissist.
We all have those moments, I think. Have you had this when you have a friend and you actually know they're not really listening, and you're sort of every time you have a conversation with that friend, you talk quite slowly. And I've said to certain friends, it might be that I'm boring, by the way, because I seem to have quite a few friends who must be narcissists because they're not interested in me. But I've had that a few times where I've just thought, like, I don't mind if you don't want to listen, but I'd rather not waste the minute of me explaining the thing you asked me about.
Yes, yeah. I think it's environmental as well. It could be. It's different age groups, it's different cultures. The last time I had a friend like that, he's now an ex-friend, he was 29, so he's kind of like millennial, Gen Z crossover, and I hate to be that middle-aged man saying it, but these things are not helping.
That's a phone for anyone listening.
That's a phone. If you're just listening, I just wave my phone. They offer short-term dopamine by validating to you that you exist. They function as a mirror. Now, if anybody knows the story of Narcissus, that we get the term narcissistic personality disorder from, in various versions of the story, Narcissus is a beautiful young Greek hunter. He eventually sees his own reflection in a pool and gets stuck there. He falls in love with his own reflection. He doesn't fall in love with himself. He falls in love with the image of himself. And these effing black mirrors that we all carry around in our pockets, that's all they feed back to us, is an image of ourselves. That is an open invitation to narcissism that we carry in our pockets every day.
So, well, firstly, it's a remarkable thing to think. And every now and then I think of it, it blows my mind that until relatively recently in human history, nobody knew what they looked like. It's just no mirrors. And the best you can do is a lake. I imagine that you'd never know, never. You'd be 90 and go, I lived a long life. I have no idea.
Was I fit?
was I buff?
Yeah, yes, Grandad, you were beautiful. Thank you.
You still are. Well, what do I know? I just, you all look terrible. Maybe I look great. So firstly, does that imply then that narcissism, like, because I guess I would have thought back in the day, maybe you got a certain percentage of people, they're born and they're just narcissists. But what you're saying with regards to tech and social media and stuff, it's making more. So is it sort of a thing that can change, not just in the population, how many are narcissists, but in you as you become more narcissistic, less narcissistic, depending on what's going on?
There is context-specific narcissism, but it should really only be, if you imagine like a soundboard with various dials on it, it should just be dialing up the latent narcissism that you actually have. Full-blown narcissistic personality disorder is quite different, and I think it's still fairly rare, because it requires a very specific type of abusive environment to be raised in. And as I said before, there are epigenetic factors. But trait narcissism is absolutely going up. I mean, absolutely trait narcissism. It's been going up. This is not my opinion. This is the published research. It started in the 70s in America, and they were like, trait narcissism year on year is absolutely skyrocketing.
What does that mean for Western civilization? Because we are more individualistic than Eastern, apparently.
Oh, that's the allegation. And I think, having lived, I'm a resident. I've lived in the East in 3 different countries for a number of years. I'm currently a resident of the United Arab Emirates. Wow. I've lived in Malaysia. I've lived in Thailand. There isn't really an East anymore. That's kind of a fantasy. If they have internet connection and they know who the Kardashians are, you can forget about it. There isn't. So yes, the old idea was the East is collective and the West is individualistic. It doesn't seem to quite work as a generalization. I think one of the things that we can say, though, is that there will be, as trait narcissism dials up for Western civilization, which now will include Thailand, Malaysia, right the way through, except there will be holdout countries, obviously, where the culture that they have in that country is stronger than what we can sort of call Instagram culture, Western culture. There will be some that can resist it, but most won't. Most will fall. Even the hardest core countries in the world are falling. Saudi Arabia is falling to the West.
It's just too alluring, the whole sort of individualistic internet, social media stuff.
It's too alluring, and the platforms are too powerful. I think as soon as I start talking like this, I know people switch off. They're like,
please continue.
Because nobody wants to hear this. These things that we have in our pockets, they're the device and the apps have had billions of dollars pumped into them for more than a decade, finding out how to entrap and fracture your attention. Bottom line, indisputable. We know this to be true. The people who develop the apps turn around and go, sorry about that, humanity. I seem to have released an evil curse onto the world. We know that this is true. And so it's the ideology is very, very powerful because it appeals to human weakness whilst presenting as a strength. So it's like, be base, be sinful, be full of lust, be full of rage, be full of sloth, be full of envy. But tell yourself that you're doing it in the name of charity, virtuosity, and what's good for the greater good. We know that this ideology is not for the greater good. We know it's hyper-individualistic, but it's a way of consuming a masturbatory consummation of your own virtuosity. And so, sorry, that
sounded like a rapper.
That was laboured. That was a laboured
phrase. I thought it was quite good. It sounded like a rap. So, like Eminem.
So you're encouraged to solipsistically consume the idea of yourself as being a good member of society whilst doing fuck all. You're just wiggling your thumb on a screen on a bus and drooling slightly and farting whilst telling yourself, you know, they used to call themselves social justice warriors. Imagine the audacity and the the just narcissism, blatant narcissism of it. You're not a warrior.
That name died out.
Yes, thank God.
SJW. I do wonder this about activists in particular, because they do wind us up, and I do think you might have to be a psychopath or a narcissist or something to be a real activist. But then maybe does society need those people? Do we need people on both sides to sort of rock the Casbah?
We need rock the Casbah. We need sincere adults who are going about the business of activism.
Well, what about so feminism? They got the vote, the suffragettes, and there was that woman who threw herself in front of a horse and died. And I don't know enough about her, so I'm not having to go at her, but typically for someone to have to do that, they might have to be...
They were warriors.
Yeah, well, they were, but it was pretty mad. And people at the time, just like with the Just Stop Oil, for example, Just Stop Oil stops the traffic. People want to get their kids to ambulances or... I don't know what I'm talking about. They just, I want to get my kid to ambulances. Can you please move out the way?
Oh, my kid loves ambulances.
We're trying to get to ambulances here. Gosh, get out the road. People trying to get their kids to ambulances. And we're wound up by it. But if you looked at it 100 years later, and you go, oh, wow, they really made some sort of change that they didn't realize at the time they needed. And people must have been annoyed about the horse 100 years ago, going, oh, we're trying to watch the horse racing, and God, they're trying to get the vote.
There's all these women just killing themselves under the horse's hooves. It's not good for the horse's legs either. I think you can sort of, with philosophy, good philosophy and good reasoned thinking, you can present a case that is different. It was objectively verifiable that women were being mistreated and that they needed more sovereignty, they needed more power. We were still in a phase that was thousands of years old, where they were still being seen as property. My last 2 female doctors who've helped me with a life-threatening condition are both female. I don't want to live in a world where they wouldn't have the ability to step forward with they're smarter than I am. I couldn't become a medical doctor, where they couldn't step forward and apply that intelligence to healing people. So I think that's verifiable. You say these female humans need sovereignty. Do we need traffic stoppages because a group of people who are infected with a non-science-based ideology are obsessed with the idea that we're imminently going to face a global cataclysm if they don't do that? I think they're 2 different states. It's a good question, but I think I could probably play devil's advocate and probably could defend the case that what the suffragettes were doing was worthwhile and absolutely necessary for the good of humanity. And what these people do, they might be very well intentioned. I'm sure that they are. I'm sure if I spoke to them, I would see a good intention sometimes in there. It can't all be about communal narcissism and pro-social narcissism. Some of these people must. But then if you convinced me, if you brainwashed me to think that the world would be on fire in 15 years if I didn't do the terrible thing today, I'm sure I would do terrible things as well. But I'm not brainwashed. I'm happy to read the published science and to read the data, and it just doesn't indicate that.
Yeah. I mean, no, yeah. It's so hard to know how much, as you say, how much is narcissism, how much is being brainwashed,
yeah,
and how much in 100 years they might look back and go, "Gosh, thank God they started doing that when they did." Those heroes of stopping kids getting to ambulances. Humble bragging was one of them.
Humble bragging is a big one, yeah. The humble brag and the name drop. I mean, everybody's going to do it every once in a while, and it's cool. Like some things are genuinely worth saying. My favorite Slovenian philosopher, I once met him in a Starbucks. That's a name drop. The ironic thing about that is he's always slagging off Starbucks as being nonsense consumer capitalism. And I was in there.
Was he working behind the till? Zizek.
Zizek, yeah. So he was preparing for a seminar at Birkbeck, and I was doing a seminar at Birkbeck the same day, and I saw him through the window, and I went in and I was like, "Oh, I'm a big fan of your work," and he's eating a chicken sandwich and drinking a latte. He's like, yes, thank you very much. I will see you later. And he was great. That sometimes is going to come out because it's relevant. What I would say is, if you see people doing that a lot, if you see people, a lot of humble bragging, a lot of name dropping, a lot of, for me, I feel it before I have a cognitive realization. It's a somatic feeling that creeps into me. I'm like, something weird is going on here. Let me just analyze what this person is saying. Hang on a fucking second. They just told me a story 5 minutes ago where they did something amazing, but presented it as something that they didn't really want to do, but they were forced to do. And I was like, that then to me is where I'd start drawing the line and saying, there's something else going on here. This person is trying to convince me of a version of themselves that isn't their authentic self. They're advertising.
It seems mad, again, going back to the beginning of this conversation, when we're both tearing our hair out, going, why don't people notice the humble bragging and oh, I'm so modest and I'm so wonderful, and call it out. I mean, I have such an aversion to it that I think a lot of us do this. I'm sure you do as well. Ricky Gervais is famous for it, is going the other way and just bragging really blatantly, and because it's actually better, I think, than doing the humble brag. So I just go, I've just done an amazing thing. Here's a photo. I'm really proud of myself.
He's probably the master of that. He's actually created his own art of bragging and playing the role of a total braggart in a way that is hilarious.
Yeah.
I think he must have got it from the David Brent character. The playing the role of somebody who's totally unaware of how obnoxious they're being, but he's so charming when he does it. It's what he does is brilliant. And it does seem to be, that would be the way to go. I agree with you. I'm surprised when people can't see this kind of thing coming up. It's very, very frustrating, because to me it's obvious when people are at it, when they're playing a game, when they're engaged in a game to convince you of something that probably isn't true. My propaganda alarm just goes off. I'm like, this is not sincere communication. This is manipulation.
I remember because we're so used to doing the humble, it has to be the humble thing. Remember everyone used to, I can't say the word for it. Well, you can, fraping. People used to leave their Facebook open.
God, yeah, I remember.
That was a big thing for a while, wasn't it? Everyone would get each other and they'd put out like a status and some of their friends thing, or we'd put on each other, and we'd always do, me and my friend used to do it to each other, and it would always be stuff like horrible, disgusting things. But we started doing them more subtly so that it might look like it was actually them. And I did it to my friend who was an academic, and she was all into the literature and stuff like that. And I think I just said like, just got a really good score in my exam, just really pleased about it. And because no one does that ever, she looked weird and everyone was like, "You all right?" and having a go at her. And she's like, "It wasn't me." I was like, "Yeah, right." No one believed her that it wasn't her, because it was so just really happy that I did well in my test.
That's very, very subtle propagandizing, comrade. I approve.
What about nice people, fake nice people, narcissists? Does it ever show? Does the mask fall away?
Typically the mask will fall away because what people should understand if they're not familiar with narcissism is we think of narcissism as being stable. So they're always feeling good about themselves and they always feel entitled. That's called grandiose narcissism. It's highly correlated with psychopathy. Most narcissism that shows up in the world is not like that. It's compensatory and it's vulnerable narcissism. So they're actually battling the sense that they really don't deserve the status that they've gone for, and they struggle with feelings of shame. When they're struggling with feelings of shame, they become hypervigilant and hypersensitive. Any narcissistic injury that they receive, which could be basically any feedback from reality or people in reality that say, "Hey, you're not as amazing as you fucking think you are," will induce narcissistic rage. So if things are not going well, the mask will probably slip and you'll see an incident of narcissistic rage, and you won't recognize the person. It'll be like a Jekyll Hyde situation. They'll show up as a completely different character and get very, very nasty very, very quickly.
Have you experienced that?
Multiple times. I was raised in a household like that. So yeah.
What was that like?
For a child, it was confusing and frightening, and probably what led me to the study of psychology, because I got good at detecting it before it came along. I became hypervigilant of other people's emotional states. I became hypervigilant of other people's modes of communication. It was to try and make myself safe, basically, in that environment.
Was that both parents?
Yes, it was. Yeah. And alcohol could be a factor as well. This is the kind of environment that breeds codependency, a codependency that I've struggled with my whole life.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, codependency is not a clinical term. It's a term that came into popularity in the 1980s. There was 3 bestsellers written in America by American women talking about highly narcissistic and psychopathic husbands, and they described the women who stayed with them as codependents. So you are servile, you are submissive, you are overgiving in a way to avoid the pain of punishment. You trade off parts of yourself that you otherwise shouldn't do, just so that you feel calm and feel safe again. And that's a typical codependent mode of operating inside of a relationship.
It must have been very difficult for you growing up.
Yes, it was hard. It was unpleasant. I got out of the house as soon as I could. As soon as I was of age, I left. It was a very, very uncomfortable environment to grow up in.
Does that affect you still today?
Yes, I'm still in therapy. Yeah. I'm seeing my therapist tomorrow. Once a week I'm in therapy. Yeah, I have to go to therapy. Therapy massively helps. I stopped for 5 years, and I really wish I had.
So some people say the issue is, and I've felt this a little bit as well, it gives you like a hit of adrenaline, like talking about your issues with someone, being close with them and having a breakthrough, and then you need to keep going back. It's very easy to do therapy wrong, and that's not. Maybe there'll always be an element of that there. I equate that to like when people say they love watching my YouTube videos. I'm like, what do you love about the fact that you're only watching my video because you were narcissistically abused? But there is a dopamine hit from the recognition and the validation. Yeah. They know that they've been in a narcissistically abusive relationship. Therapy sometimes can be rewarding, and sometimes, largely speaking, it's just insight. It's an interaction with truth. That was Jung who said that. It's the therapist's prime job is to bring the patient to truth. So if you're getting a lot of dopamine hits from that would suggest to me that your relationship with truth itself is probably a little bit off. Yeah, maybe there's a little bit of emotional immaturity still there, but with as therapy continues, that would pass. I also started to worry that my therapist was relying on my weekly income. the pay.
Yeah. I mean, we have to think about all these things. It's the real world. Capitalism.
People don't think about that, I think, with therapy. Like, you're really thinking after some time. And I was seeing him for a while, and I was like, I think maybe I'm okay. And he was like, are you though? And I was like, well, I don't know. I'll be back next week then. And later I changed therapists, and she was very quickly, quite soon, was just like, look, I think you're all right to go. And I was like, but you live in a nicer house than this person did. So you don't need it as much.
There are financial pressures at work here for sure.
Oh man. Well, yeah, therapy.
But in the communist utopia of our future, there won't be comrade.
Yeah, well, that would be brilliant. Fantastic. But we'll be in the gulag. That's the only problem.
We will be, yes.
Are you a narcissist?
No, but I did. There's a test online that people can do. It's called the D factor, and it tests for various dark traits. And I did this 3 years ago. I am at the level of trait narcissism that most low-level celebrities would be, not high-level celebrities.
Because you are a
level
celebrity.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's made you who you. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah. It's there was other stuff in there that I wasn't expecting. I was quite high for sadism as well. Everybody should do it.
I'm going to do this.
Yeah, it's called the D factor test. It's completely free. It's worth a go.
If you can be honest with yourself in the answers, I imagine.
Yes.
People want to imagine they're better people than they are.
Oh God, yeah. If you trick the test, then it's like tricking a therapist. It's pointless. I'm not surprised to hear I'm high in trait narcissism. I wanted to be an actor since I was a kid. I don't mind being the center of attention for bursts of time. I find it exhausting eventually, but and I feel like I have something to say. So that test doesn't test you for entitlement, but I do have entitlement. Like, I do have entitlement issues. Like, I would be like, I have something to say. I'm worth listening to. Is it healthy or not? I don't know.
Do you walk around saying things in your house, like hearing your preparing speeches and stuff?
Only to my mother to annoy her. And she's like, what are you on about? I'm like, you're listening to a genius. You're so lucky you gave birth to a genius. Now listen to me.
The reason that's funny is because it's so relatable, and no one would ever admit that, Right. It is so relatable. And I walk around the house like arguing with people that I knew years ago, and
the perfect comeback.
That was so eloquent how I just said that, And I think I wish people could be more honest about that. Unless I am just the same. Maybe we're completely different. And I was thinking, should I also say that I might be on that low celebrity thing? But then I'm sort of saying I'm in some form of sort of celebrity, and then people would then go, know your station. Don't get above your station, mate. Bloody hell. Do you think I might be a narcissist?
I would be very surprised. You certainly don't have narcissistic personality disorder, but you have the job that you have. So I would be surprised if you score very low for trait narcissism. That would be unlikely.
I just feel like they're all at it. I just feel like everyone's got more of it than they're letting on.
I think, again, if we're talking in the public space, what I mentioned MMA fighters before. Why would you go through all of that pain and suffering to be at the center of attention? Why go and study at university and go through the experiences you've gone through, which were not fun, and you definitely had easier options to make money and to then be in this position? Why have I gone through what I've gone through to be in this position? It can give you purpose. I mean, entitlement in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. I've been saying to my followers for the last 6 years, I'm grandiose as well, which is a narcissistic trait. I had this.
What does that mean?
Grandiose means you, largely speaking, you paint the narrative of your life and who you are in very grand terms. Okay. So I was like, well, my objective with the YouTube channel was to change the face of mental health forever. I wanted to change the way people thought about childhood trauma. That's a grandiose objective. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, I'll get 100,000 followers and, make people feel a bit better. It was like, no, I want to change the way people think about mental health issues. And that's what I'm driven to do. And I'm not ashamed of that. But that could be said to be an example of pro-social narcissism and also communal narcissism.
Like renting out this big studio we're in.
It depends on your purpose. No psychologist worth their salt is going to say it's good if everybody has no trait narcissism. If you have no narcissism, you're mentally sick. If you have zero narcissism, that's not good. You would cease to function as a human being. You should be self-interested. You should have a vision for yourself. You should be purposeful. And if you don't have a degree of grandiosity, because grandiosity is always delusional, You're in the realm that's out. You're not being cynical. You're being idealistic and utopian. But what's going to move us? How do we move forward without utopianism? You need a degree of that, I would say.
Is there a difference between male and female narcissism?
In its core, no, because narcissistic personality disorder occurs before our sex and our gender roles have even set in. So you're 3-4 years old, a little boy and a little girl are not different enough. So in its core, it's a no, it's a denial of reality, and then it's engagement in delusion. Once your biology and your hormones kick in and your latent genetic predilections kick in, which we have, he said controversially, men and women are different. The system we operate is different. The hardware is different. And the cultural conditioning, the gender roles kick in. Then the manifestation of narcissism, of course, will be different. There are tendencies that men probably will be more bullying than women will, in a direct and open way, perhaps. And women perhaps might engage in more sort of subtle psychological manipulation and damaging people's reputation in order to get what they want. Maybe they'll use more sexuality. Maybe this one will use more intellect. Broadly speaking, I don't think it's all that different between men and women, broadly speaking.
Why do you look different to how you used to look? Because I saw videos of you like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Is it just the hair that's shaved on the sides?
No, I had some sort of weird glow up about when I turned 41. I just got really fit. I just got way hotter when I turned 41.
It just happened?
I don't know why.
You're kidding me?
No, it's weird.
That doesn't sound...
I'm not even in denial of this. I look at pictures of myself. I talked about this with my ex-girlfriend. She laughs at me. She's like, what, did you make a deal with the devil or something? I don't know. I think one of the things that really, really helped was I did something called, and there was a watermark moment, which is I did something called 75 Hard, which is a training protocol you do for 75 days. You train twice a day. There's no alcohol, there's no drugs, there's no nonsense. You're only on water, protein and vegetables, and you're training a lot. I dropped my body fat and it did something to my hormonal profile. Because some of the, I've had different, one of my ex-girlfriends is a geneticist, right. And she says the shape of your face now is actually reflective of higher degrees of testosterone. And I said, oh, you mean I have lower body fat? And she said, no, your face has actually changed shape. Yeah. So there's actual testosterone indicators in the face. So I don't get paid by 75 Hard. It was just, let's say it was a rigorous training protocol that went on for an extended period of time. And that massively made a difference. I would just say generally to people listening, like I've just had very, very serious health issues in the last 3 months. Everybody should be keeping their weight down, keep the body fat off, stay lean, eat well, get your sleep, and don't, stay away from drugs and junk food.
Wow. And then you can get this new face at 41.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm 45 now, and I look better than I did at 35.
Yeah, remarkably so.
It's weird.
In shape, you look fantastic. You're a handsome man.
Yes.
You were handsome before, and now...
Gorgeous, darling. Gorgeous. Yeah, I'm lucky. I'm grateful.
It gives us all something to aspire to. I'm 34. When I'm 41,
But I will tell you, and anybody who knows me will back this up. I'm in the gym a lot, and I train hard.
There's that as well.
Yeah. If you can fall in love with doesn't have to be the gym. Could be dance. Could be rock climbing. Could be walking. Fall in love with something. It should be a joyful activity that you can engage in with your body, and that'll see you through and for the rest of your life.
For me, it's tennis.
You love tennis?
Oh, I've got way into tennis now.
And you're the right sort of, you're like long limbs and you can cover the court. That's fantastic.
I should have played it since I was a kid, but I've played football and stuff like that, and so much happier playing tennis. But I got very podgy about a year and a half ago, so I took up tennis. I got lessons. I'd never really done it. It's my favourite thing ever. I lost all the weight.
You lost it, and you weren't calorie counting or anything?
No, I just enjoyed myself.
You went and enjoyed tennis. Perfect. That's exactly the way to do it.
So happy. Yeah. Who's I suppose you've already said Zizek, but who's a heretic? Who's a heretic that you really look up to?
Nietzsche.
Ooh, Nietzsche. Okay. So I don't know much about Nietzsche, except that he's often probably unfairly conflated with Nazis.
Yes, I mean, he would have been appalled by what the Nazis did, and we know from his writings what he thought of anti-Semites. I mean, he loathed anti-Semites. He thought anti-Semitism was an appalling position to adopt. And the wonderful thing about Nietzsche, because Nietzsche's a wonderful thing, he was very, very good at predicting the future, and he could see it coming. And he said it will happen in wasn't Germany back then. It will happen. I think he was Prussian. It will happen in this area of Europe. We are in the grip of anti-Semitism. Wow. And it was oh God, this is the 1860s he was writing. And he said, this is an infection, we have to burn it out. He wrote in Beyond Good and Evil whole chapters on how much Western culture owes to the Jews and Judaism, and how appalling anti-Semitism was. However, so there's my defense of, you mentioned Nietzsche, people bring up the Nazis. He wrote in books like Thus Spake Zarathustra things that were so tempting to extremists, they should not have been written down on paper.
Wow.
They're very dangerous.
We're talking sort of Ayn Rand kind of libertarianism.
Beyond. Nietzsche wrote, he's such a brilliant mind, and he really needed an editor. And maybe people will say, oh, you shouldn't censor people. There are things written in the first few chapters of Thus Spake Zarathustra that if I'd known him, I would have said, don't publish that. So just one of them. And the reason why I say this is dangerous is because every genocidal maniac in history has manifested some variation of this ideological stance. He says that, look, there's really no hope for humanity as we are now. The Ubermensch, which you've heard of, the Overman, the Superman. That was not for now. We were to sacrifice ourselves today to build a bridge with the future so that the Superman could be born. That alone, there are other ideas that he came out with that are like intellectual grenades that he just threw into the population that I don't know how he didn't think some variation of the Nazis was going to hold on to it. But that one thing, when you say to people, sacrifice yourself and even other people and even your humanity today to build a bridge for the betterment of humanity in the future, that's grandiose. So now we're thinking cosmic terms. Yes, today people will bleed and suffer, but humanity will move forward into a brighter future, and history will absolve us of our, I don't know, some poetic language to absolve you of your...
The greater good.
The greater good. It will cleanse your hands of all sin in the view of human evolution. He wrote in those terms. It's beautiful and terrifying. So yes, I love Nietzsche, but I also would have said to him, listen, mate, could you just calm down?
Where do you want to send people who will watch him?
They can look up Richard Grannon on YouTube, and they cannot escape me. I'm everywhere. I have multiple YouTube channels. I have an Instagram as well if they want to keep up with me daily. I'm very active on Instagram as well.
Go and check out Richard Grannon's channel. He's one of my favorite people on YouTube. He's everyone's favorite person on YouTube. People love it. Go and check him out and feed his narcissism as well. Feed it all. And Dad, keep watching this channel. I'm going to have something very interesting right up here. Click it.